People First Radio is a program about people, the society in which we live, and issues related to health and wellness.
Welcome to People First Radio. I'm Joe Pugh. Vancouver Island artist Philip Mix says as a kid, all he wanted to do was draw. Now 70 years old, Mix says at some point along the way, he figured it was more than likely a coping mechanism for him. Mix is one of a number of artists contributing to Recognition and Recollection, an intersection of art and mental health. It's an exhibit featuring 55 art pieces at the Cowichan Performing Arts Centre, and it's on until the end of February. We'll hear from Mix later on in the show, but first I spoke with Cowichan Valley Arts Council President Elizabeth Croft about the origins of the exhibit.
In the Cowichan Valley, there's an Arts and Culture Division, and it's part of the regional government, and there are 5 regional arts councils. And so the division got us all together and said, how would you feel about doing a collaborative art show with all 5 arts councils? And of course, it sounds like a brilliant idea, and we're holding it in the lobby of the theater. And so they're expecting like thousands of people to go through. So it's a huge opportunity to promote the local artists. When we picked the theme, we were thinking about a significant amount of research and anecdotal evidence that folks are really quite concerned about mental health. And this is sort of part of the lingering reaction to the COVID pandemic. As well, January is Mental Health Month. Now, January is a number of other things, but it's also Mental Health Month. So we had this space in January. We have 5 arts councils and hugely talented artists to put on a show for a community, for a theme that our community is really interested in.
Can you give me a sense of how maybe rare this is to have? And this might make me sound a bit silly, but when I read like 5 arts councils coming together, it makes me think of something fantasy or Tolkien-y. How often does that come together, that all 5 collaborate on something?
Well, all 5 arts councils, we are very collegial, and we certainly stay in touch, and we promote one another's events. And we also sort of keep in conversation about best practices and that kind of thing. And we do work with local governments, and we represent ourselves together with local governments. But to have a 5 arts council art show, that is rare indeed. I don't recollect it happening before. So that's kind of exciting because we get to spend a little more time and conversations together, and it's very nice to work with new folks from time to time.
Now, the description for the exhibit says it calls on viewers to consider the ways we can encourage more engagement with the arts to meet universal community needs. Can you tell me a little more about that? What do you mean when you say universal community needs, and what do you think some of the ways we can meet them and use art to meet them are?
That is a way of expressing 2 things. One, I think anybody today would say, yes, art engages people in a very deep and profound way, and a way that's almost difficult to express, to articulate. The other thing is that more and more research today tells us that art is incredibly good for you. There are hundreds of pieces of research on this, peer-reviewed research, and art lowers your cortisol levels, so that's your stress hormone, and it also increases oxytocin, which is your bonding hormone, and it's, a warm and fuzzy hormone. People who engage with art, whether it's just an art enthusiast or someone who is an artist and practicing art at any skill level, have better health indicators across all indications. So better physical health, more connectedness, better emotional health, better social skills, and art, whether you're engaging or viewing or whatever, lights up all of your brain. And so it's actually really good for your cognitive health. So when we talk about sort of appreciating the universal importance of art, it's because art it's wired to the human condition. It's wired to our heart and our minds. It's something that we have to do that we don't do enough of. It's good for the soul, and that's what we're talking about here.
If I'm listening to this in, say, Nanaimo or in Victoria or St. John, New Brunswick or the Comox Valley, is there anything you think I need to know about the art scene in the Cowichan Valley and surrounding area? Is there anything you think that makes it stand out or makes it its own thing?
There was an enormous piece of research undertaken in 2019, and they surveyed all across Canada art sectors on all the different aspects. It turns out that Cowichan has the most artists per capita of any place in Canada. So I think what makes it stand out is just the huge variety of different modalities of art, the depth of the talent here, the color and the vibrancy. And so I think so many things here are touched by art. Our downtown murals, our Chemainus murals. Our artists are out in the community. They're teaching, they're exhibiting in local restaurants. We host a lot of shows done by students and emerging artists. And I think that people will be surprised at just how prevalent art is in our community, and certainly the caliber of the work, and just such a plethora of themes and skills and methodologies. I think people will just be blown away. Our Arts Council, we're blessed. We have a beautiful gallery, and it's in a big community center. So we have a lot of people coming by. They're going to the library, they're going to the pool, they're going to yoga. And the one thing that I notice is people, they wonder if art is too highbrow for them. And in community art, our purpose is to just get rid of that myth altogether. Come in, enjoy the piece. Art is the only thing in the world where you can, with utter credibility, say, I don't know why I love it, but I do. That is a perfectly good, educated, intelligent, heartfelt thing to say about art. And it really is so good for you, and it really is for everybody. Art is there so you can understand it. It's not so that the artist can show off. It's not so that you can stand around and say smart things. Art is for what it does for you.
Elizabeth Croft is president of the Cowichan Valley Arts Council. I also spoke with one of the artists whose work is being exhibited in Recognition and Recollection.
My name is Philip Mix. I'm an artist. I'm 70 years old, and I've been doing art since I was probably 11. I am a sort of a fixture in Victoria as far as an artist that's known there. Not so much broadly, but I have shown in many places, including abroad and in Toronto. So I have a pretty significant track record of art that has covered a lot of ground in a lot of different areas, and seen a lot of different regions. So that's me. Yeah.
And you're going to be taking part in this exhibit, Recognition and Recollection. Could you tell me a little bit about what you're going to be bringing to the show?
I decided, I was notified by a friend of mine that this show was going on. He said, oh, hey, Philip, your work just fits right into this category. So I thought about it a bit, and I had something else going on at the Art Gallery of Victoria, and I wanted very much to show work that I was doing about seniors and aging. And I thought, well, I could put the same works in there, but then I realized that I was kind of duplicating myself. So I looked back into my files, and I had started a series based on a book, basically, by Novo Hari. It was called Nexus. At that time, about 3 years ago, there was so much conversation about youth and the anxiety that was being presented to them. Now, I'm not youthful anymore, but I certainly could recognize that anxiety that I had when I was also in that age group. And my sons, who were in their 20s, had some friends, and the conversation was just so broad and so big that it just kept coming up. So I have put into the show a piece that is basically a montage of a young girl, I guess a young girl who would you probably state her to be about in her mid-20s or whatever. And the painting is called, they called her Angel. And it uses sort of metaphors from rather old metaphors of looking through a globe, at a globe to see if you can determine what your future will be. And then another metaphor of a maze. And I portrayed her in three different stages. One where she's looking straight out at you, the second where she's looking down and into herself, and the other as a child when she would probably be only 6 or 7. And even at that point, you can see that she is struggling with the fact that she's in a world that she doesn't understand. And I've put a beam of light coming through a small window, sort of shining on top of her. And that is the imagery that I've used. And the title they called her Angel was the idea that we all think our little children who are walking around very quietly and obediently are angels. But because they are so quiet and so obedient, they often are left languishing in the cracks. And I know several people who feel exactly that way and finally trying to find their own voices. But in the case of my painting, it's a question of whether she found her voice or not. Yeah.
So the theme of the exhibit is all about the idea of kind of the link between art and folks' mental health. You talked there about maybe some of the anxieties that come with youth and how you reflected them in your work. Maybe what's your own kind of relationship to those ideas and maybe those youthful anxieties as an artist yourself?
Okay. Well, I picked up on the line at the Five Guilds art show that they're going to use the thing as this concept of the art that's meaning for the identity and either a personal identity. And there's very good evidence that I began drawing at a very young age. I was probably 5 or 6 when I was recognized that I could draw. And it was practically the only thing that I ever wanted to do. Like there was, you could throw a football at me, but as soon as we stopped throwing it around, I went in and I started drawing as fast as I could. So I have done that all my life and never really recognizing till maybe 10 years ago that it was a ways of me coping with being what's the word, sensitive, a hypersensitive individual, someone who can only take in so much before they are sort of exploding in their mind. So I recognize that this concept of recognition and recollection basically really fits into my own profile as an artist who suffer some mental types of struggles myself. I've been diagnosed as bipolar, and I take medication for it. And it's funny when you're 70, you look back on your life and you go, oh my gosh, I just thought I was being brilliant, and no, I wasn't. I was just kind of falling off a wall. So now things are at a place where I'm capable of expressing those things quite well with my own artwork. Not that it's actually a very, shall we say, a marketable item, but I have been blessed with the fact that I have a support system around me. And so I can do the most unmarketable things I can possibly imagine and still get away with it. So I'm doing that at this time in my life.
So there's this idea you shared there that you were always looking to make art and there was this kind of cathartic aspect to it for you. What about the process of you've made the art and now you're exhibiting it for other people? What is that like for you?
Well, there's a period when I was in my youth that I equated having a favorable response to my art as a way of stating that I was, valuable in society, that I had a place in society. And I've really relooked at that in a different way now, and part of it has just been research into all the different historical artists that have come through time. And part of that is recognizing that many of them simply even weren't even recognized in their own time period. Some of the most famous artists that we know died almost without knowing that they had affected any change in society whatsoever. Paul Gauguin is a great example of someone who just fought against the Bard completely. And to this day, his grave is simply a small little plot in Hawaii somewhere, and we all recognize him. But towards the end of his life, he was actually ostracized to the point that he had one or two single friends. So I think we love to tout the fact that artists are these wonderful, creative individuals that go out there and make huge impacts on our society. But our society doesn't necessarily pick up on the fact that these people are doing these things not because they're looking for huge recognition, but because they're looking for a voice, and they're looking for a place to simply state that we do all owe it to ourselves to look at many things. And I think that the artist nowadays, in fact, I think almost all art nowadays, I think with the advent of certain kinds of music, I think the 60s were phenomenal with looking at how music could affect individuals almost on a what we call a primary level. It was unbelievable. Whereas prior to that, everything was kind of all aristocratic, mishmash or whatever you want to call it. And it had that element to it. But other than folk music, there really wasn't much. And now music is a huge, most people I know just can't live a day without a tune somewhere in their head. So it would be lovely if the visual arts had almost a similar concept in it, but I don't see it happening too soon, unless this internet craze is going to drive it into a completely different place altogether. So, yeah.
Well, I'm interested to hear maybe about your own experiences of taking in other people's art. You just talked there about this kind of classic idea that so many of the super revered artists became a lot more famous kind of after they had died. When you have that in mind, what is it like taking in other people's work for you? How do you go about looking at art and taking something from it?
I'm really going to stick my neck out here. I'm a snob. Um, I do have high regard for anyone who wants to attempt to do something like a visual artist or any person like that. I have very high regard for people like Del Torres, who just takes it to the next level in his films. People who are willing to use who research and look out and actually implement things that other artists have done and somehow are able to pull those into their own work. To me, that is extraordinarily significant. This concept that we all have to go out and find our own way, and that no other rabbit has gone down the same hole, is to me ridiculous, and I don't understand why we continue to make that kind of theme. So I'm very much about people, if they are really intent on looking at something, that they research it to the, not knowing that of course everyone has to make a living and everything. I had to become an art conservator just to make a living. So I'm not saying that you can make a living off of some of these things. That said, I one of my favorite artists is a man who said, "Not a day without a line," and I follow that almost to the T myself. Yeah.
You talked about this idea that you would love for looking at visual art to become as maybe accessible and widespread and kind of poppy almost as music seems to be for people. if we are approaching this idea of this art show that's happening in the Cowichan Valley that's themed around art and your mental health, what would you say to get people to come and check it out and maybe avoid this idea that, you got to stick your pinky out and be wearing your finest Sunday suit and looking at art?
Yeah. Well, come dressed up nicely. It feels good. But other than that, I think what I would say is come with curiosity. I think without curiosity, you can do a lot of things, but you're not really living something that's more full. And I noticed that people who come in and they have a preset idea of what art should look like, okay, this landscape or that landscape, and it's got to sort of resemble this. That might be great for decorating your home, but that's a completely different concept when you're walking into a gallery and you've got a theme that's talking about what mental health is about. Now you're there not to decide whether you like something or don't like something. You're there to decide if it speaks to you at all. And if it does, that to me would be the highest praise you can give that artist. Whether you go over and say it's beautiful or not beautiful, or you like the colors or you don't like the colors, it makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. I think it could make a difference to maybe one or two artists who are just trying to get their feet on the ground. But in general, I think what you want to be able to do is have some recognition that you've affected the person the way, as an artist, that you wanted them to be affected. I'll give you a quick example. I was setting up a show of some of my artwork, and I have one that's called Memory Loss. And I put it up in the art gallery the other day. And as I was hanging the show just to bring it about, someone came in and said, "Oh, thank you for wrecking my day." Because they walked in and they were completely affected by the painting to the point where they said, "Oh, this is so completely sad." And I thought, of course, everything else on the walls was landscape. And then I had this one piece that really, literally, and I said, "Thank you very much. I'm sorry I wrecked your day, and perhaps before 10 o'clock you shouldn't have walked in here. But at the same time, if I hadn't affected you that way, I would have felt that I had really not accomplished what I was attempting to do." And I think that's the difference. Yeah.
How do you sit with that weight that your art has had that kind of an impact on someone?
I see it as the way a newscaster or a person in I just think of some of the more amazing people who go into the front lines to be, recording something that's going on. A native person who goes right to the source and says, "Oh, look here, this is what these people are actually feeling," or people who are walking through the front lines. To me, artists succeed when they go to the front line. When they just kind of tail everybody else, they're not actually creating something that will impact people in the long run. And I see it as a similar job. I often say my job is not to fix anything. My job is to state almost the obvious and make you see something that you didn't see because you were so busy thinking about something else at the time. So the weight of it for me is actually, I feel like if I haven't done that, I better get back in my studio and work on this a bit more, So, and I think about it a lot. I really, really take great pains to try and figure out what it is I'm saying before I even begin. Yeah.
People First Radio and Media are Vancouver Island Mental Health Society education and awareness programs.
You're listening to People First Radio. I'm Joe Pugh. My guest is Vancouver Island artist Philip Mix. His work is being exhibited in a show in Cowichan called Recognition and Recollection. It's about the links between art and mental health And that's what we've been talking about so far on the show. I'm interested as well to hear a bit more about the journey of kind of emotional awareness alongside the making art and what that has been like for you. Off the top of the conversation, you were talking about this idea that when you were a kid, you just made art because you loved making art and it was something you always gravitated towards. And you shared that later on you felt like you had this realization that you were almost doing it as like a coping mechanism, or when you felt like you were maybe getting overstimulated with the world, it was something you could escape to. Like once you had that realization, what if anything changed for you, and what was it like making art following that?
I don't know if I think it just qualified some of the things that I had done. Things that when I look back on them when I was young, I used to think, why did I do such a strange thing? One of the things I did as a kid was I always destroyed my own work, and it was I'd cut it up into little pieces and I'd stick it on walls, and I would just match the colors. And so eventually I became an art conservator. So now I can match colors just like that. I just flip of the switch and they're there. But another thing I did, I realized like I had gone to camp. Now everybody goes to camp because they're supposed to be just great, exciting, awesome adventure and everything like that. I didn't find it quite so fascinating at all. In fact, if anything, I saw as much, to get away from that community involvement as I possibly could. And did not recognize that as a kid per se, but my art showed it. I have an example of a piece in my mind. I remember I tore it up, of course, and it doesn't exist anymore. But it's a piece of art that shows a fireplace or a fire that everybody's supposed to be huddling around and enjoying this fire. And what I recognize in retrospect is that there's a fire and there's people all around the fire and they're all holding hands. But my viewpoint is from outside the circle. I'm not in the circle. I've literally put the backs of all these people, they're blocking the fire and everything like that. So I am actually perceiving this from outside the circle. And I recognize this is often how people who find it difficult to cope with life respond to life. They step outside the circle. They don't try to stay within it. And I think mental health has been for me a time now, and finally at this age, I'm beginning to say, okay, I'll step in a little bit more into the circle. I'll contribute a little bit more to the community involvement. I'm not saying it's any easier for me, but I will say that I'm more willing to do it. Not that it's easier. So, and the art itself is actually the lifeline that I use to throw out to people, because without that, you wouldn't find me just jumping in there and saying, "Hey, let's all go out and party." No, you'll see me heading off the other direction in a car, usually just to go camping by myself or do something completely on my own. And that's just how I've always been as a person. So I can be very social because I've learned that coping mechanism too. So, you learn a lot of coping mechanisms when you're young.
Well, can you tell me maybe a little bit more about the art community and what getting involved in it is like, and what is maybe specific to the community in and around the Cowichan Valley?
Oh, that's a good question because I'm just getting my toe dipped into it. I think arts in the Cowichan Valley is somewhat, and I understand why. It's oriented towards more craft orientation than other things. But I have discovered that since they opened the art gallery in Cowichan and everything and put up some really quite remarkable shows, that there have been artists who have been floating around in the background and that I've never heard of and most people have never heard of. And it's a great opportunity to begin to realize that, there's people other than Robert Bateman out there and other individuals who we all know their names. I even know Bateman's son and everything like that. But it doesn't mean that artists do tend to hang around people who have a similar concept of what they want to express, because we like being stroked on the back by somebody else who says, "Oh, you've got that figured out." But I have a quote in my office that says, "If you figured something out, it just means that you're not able to learn it anymore. So just don't bother figuring it out. Just keep doing it until you. And if you do think you know something, attempt to do something that you think you don't know." And that to me is again the curiosity. And so I try to bring, whenever I go into any situation, I always try to bring with myself, when I'm speaking with other people, of course, I'll ask them if they're artists and that, but I want to know where their curiosity lies. I want to know, are they just trying to learn how to make a bowl, or are they interested in trying to see if they can push the boundaries on what a piece of wood will do? To me, those are the things that I try to express. And I hope to be able to, when I come into community, that's what I want to do. I want to say, let's push these boundaries, and that's what I think the show will do. I think the show, not everyone in the show will do that. Some people will simply submit something because they're just getting their feet in the door, right? But there will be some work, I'm sure, that has some sort of pursuit of, this person will say, I kind of stepped outside of my normal, and this is what came out. And my gosh, I didn't know it was in there. I think that's the kind of excitement that we want to instill in the Valley. I think it should be instilled in the art in general, because art that is solely for decorative purposes has a very useful purpose, but it doesn't take anyone into their real big curiosity level. And I think we all, especially in this day and age, we all are looking for some stability. So it's no doubt that most people will be out there looking for something that, the colors suit them really well because they want that stability. That's my purple, so there it is. But if you go there and you see something that's upsetting, I think you should go up and talk to that artist and say, why did you want to upset me like that? And that would be a great conversation as far as I'm concerned. So,
Well, something that really grabbed me in the press release description about this exhibit was that it calls on viewers to consider the ways we can encourage more engagement with the arts to meet universal community needs. And I'm wondering if I can get your perspective as one of the artists taking part in the exhibit on what that means, or what that looks like, or even just like, this exhibit has happened, you have been a part of it. What will make you feel like it has been a success?
I'm going to refer to a different show that I had, and the reason I think what will make this a success is when I've always thought, and this is because of my own experience, I've always thought the biggest success is when a 10 or 11-year-old kid comes up and he looks at something and he goes, oh, I didn't know you could do that with a piece of charcoal. Or, oh, I didn't know you could do that with paint. Or, my gosh, that really, like, that's the kind of thing that I'm kind of seeing, is that our youth are even if you're in your 20s or 30s, you still can be considered a youth in the sense that you are going there to be inspired. And that's what I'm thinking is, what if someone was to come up and say to an artist there, you just inspired me to pick up a pencil again, or you just inspired me to do this again, or you just inspired me to reach out to my friend who's been drawing forever, and I'm going to make sure that they come to this show and look at something that's there. To me, that would be getting the ball rolling. And I know people who are like that, that really know how to get excitement going. I'm not sure I'm one of those people, although I recently started to teach some young kids just because my wife got me going in it. And I said, okay, sure, why not? And it is actually exciting to watch them tear up their own paintings and scribble on top of things that you think are fantastic. And you go, oh, that's fantastic. And then they go, oh, yeah, right. And then they scribble all over top of it. And you go, well, that's good too. So there's a way of recognizing that the artistic mind has an ability to both um, respect and disrespect the things that we think of as very special. And I think that in and of itself is, is basically our salvation in some ways, is understanding that you do not want to teach anyone with what you're doing and say, well, no, now that I've got the answer, why don't you just follow along? I think you'd rather be saying, well, I found something that kind of works for me. One, see what works for you. So that's what I think would be exciting is if people came along here and were inspired to reach out to somebody in mental health or somebody that they went, or even go and talk to some senior in a facility and say, I just went to this show and, this was amazing what they were portraying. And who knows if it'll be in there or not be in there. I'm certainly hoping. I haven't seen the show, so can't tell you what's in there. But obviously, everyone who put something in there thought they were doing something that had something to do with this theme. Maybe some of it won't, maybe some of it will, but recognize that each artist is on their own little path and they're doing their best to try and get some sort of arousal from you one way or the other. So, yeah.
That really reminded me of something an old colleague of mine, Eli Glasner, I think, tweeted, which was along the lines of, for him, the mark of really good art is that it inspires whoever is consuming it to go and want to make their own art.
Oh, absolutely. I like to think that art has two really strong elements to it. One is that the person, I go see jazz and I love jazz. And when you see a group that's so tight and pulled together and has really obviously honed their craft to the point where their communication between each other is just out of this world, you can't but absorb this with an incredible amount of admiration, but it also affects you internally in a certain way. Whatever they're playing almost is secondary to the fact that they have created this gem of a construct that just you can't describe it in any other way. I think that's true with good filmmaking as well. And artists generally make things by themselves, but there's an element that has to do with the fact that they're still involved in the community on some level. They still are responding to something. So that's one part. One part is that this person has really worked on their craft. And then the second part is that they are attempting to communicate something so that you are thinking a little bit more about why you're doing what you're doing, who you're doing it for, where you are, what moves you to do things. Is it simply financial? That could be good too, especially if you're trying to support others, but it could be something that would be more along the lines of you just know that somebody needs a companion, somebody just to sit beside them or to be with them. So I think that's the kind of thing that if any of that came out of this, I would consider it all a check mark in the boxes of how to become a good human being. So, yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to bring to the conversation, either about this exhibit or just the interplay between art and mental health?
Yeah, I think one thing, and this is one of my little pet peeves, so I'm going to say it right out loud. I know often, and I've done the same thing. So I'm going to plead guilty before I even start. So say I've gone to a theater performance, and I'm coming out of the theater performance, and here in the lobby there's this artwork, and you go, oh yeah, and you've got your little cracker and your wine or whatever you're doing, and you're walking around and you're chatting. Of course you're there to socialize. But in my mind, at some point, if you could just disengage from all of that for 1 second and spend more than 3 seconds in front of each piece, I think you would be doing yourself a incredible favor. Whether you are really an art fan or not an art fan, Just look at the lines, look at the color, look at them as if you're looking at a landscape for the first time, like your baby steps are coming out. And if you can do that, I think you will be pleasantly surprised that there's something else going on in your cerebral front cortex that you never even knew existed. So I think that would be brilliant. I'll give an example. I listen to a piece of music every morning before I start anything, and I don't do anything except listen to that piece of music. And I'm listening to it. I may have heard it once or twice already, but I'm listening to it to hear something that I haven't heard it about in it before. And the familiarity is both good, and the lack of familiarity, I have to get out of that and try something completely new so that I will have something in my being re-engaged in a different way. And so I would encourage anyone who goes to that to, if they've gone to it, if they would just return to it at some point very quietly and take it in again. Stand in front of the one that really did something, a little trigger in them, and just spend some time with it. And I think spending time with art is a mentally healthy thing to do. So that's my perception of it anyway. Yeah.
Well, Philip Mix, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me about it.
You're welcome. And I thank you for reaching out. And it's amazing to be able to say these things inside a format that you have. Like I generally am not asked any of these questions. So thank you.
Philip Mix is a Vancouver Island-based artist. His work is part of the exhibit Recognition and Recollection, an intersection between art and mental health. The exhibit is on at the Cowichan Performing Arts Centre until the end of February.
People First Radio, People First Media, and People First Stories are community media projects of Vancouver Island Mental Health Society and are produced in Nanaimo, British Columbia. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of Vancouver Island Mental Health Society or its broadcast, podcast, and social media partners.